Good evening. First
Hello.
of all, hello. Thanks one more time for being here. It's an honor for the festival to receive such a singular director with such an idiosyncratic voice in cinema. We've seen Underground, and one of the things that really strikes me is the celebration of life and cinema, which is in any of your films, or in every of your films. It's very striking, very singular. When I see a Kusturica film, I know that life is going to be...
You know, it's noisy.
Yes, and it's going to be funny, and it's going to be uplifting, but it's going to... it makes you think, but it makes you think about cinema as well. It's a celebration of cinema. Do you see it that way?
I think what you just mentioned is something that we don't have to forget. I want to add something. There are periods of a life of a filmmaker that is determined by the time, or more precisely, there is no movie and there is no novel that is also absolutely given by the time that you go through and that you live. Mr. Borges was speaking about how people wrongly make perception of time. And he speaks about how the time is endless. And perception of space and time is endless. But then he asks, what do we do with now if all was endless? So endless is also now. But in the cinema and in the classical art, you have definition of time that speaks through you and tells you the story that, in fact, you believe you control, but the strongest and most powerful part of it is given by the time. This film was created under the very, I would say, incredible conditions. I lived in the United States, and there was a man who came and who said, there is a rich man in France who wants to give you money as much as you want, and you could make any movie you want. This was in fact a peak of my artistic life, in which he appeared like Mecena. Why I'm speaking about this? I'm speaking about this because you don't have it anymore. It was the end of the century, and we always forget that these are very important moments. Landmarks for certain. It was Mr. Bouygues who decided not to build just the houses and the atomic power plants, but also movies, which is very strange. Then he made the company named on his wife, and they produced 7, 8 movies. They won 6 times in Cannes. Why I'm saying this? Because I strongly believe that artistic value of a cinema has to be predetermined by those who wish to do something. Not just those who give money and those who want to become famous, those who want to go on the red carpet, those who want to be successful. This was like one of the many movies that I did in which I tried to be coming out with no psychological harm, because this movie is very big. And the main characteristic of big movies is they lose the soul. Movies are difficult to keep I would say, the pace, to keep the smell of time, to keep the soul of the people who you put together, to get musicality and the rhythm, and to keep the story being interesting. I think this film belongs to, unfortunately, to the previous century, which was also the time when it was made. I was ending century with the strength of the mixture what Peter Handke called once very successfully, it's the mixture of Shakespeare and Marx Brothers. And I think this is a good definition of the cinema that I was doing all my life. Not including two first movies, which were very realistic and very precise. You mentioned festivity, celebration and the noisy. In the last movie that I did, will be projected here, I got one of the critics saying, again Kusturica, noisy, and also he likes to shoot himself, because I was unfortunately acting in this movie. He likes to shoot himself like Vladimir Putin, halfway topless. That was definition of the approach of the film industry man. He was not speaking about what you mentioned. That's why probably you are not critic or whatever.
I know.
And it's something that I learned in the school. To me, a film or any theatrical exposure is something that has to do with the fundamental values of humanity. And we are still much better than ancient Greeks, because when they were doing this celebration in the springtime, they used to cut the head of the most beautiful man in order to fertilize the next year. And they were drinking, and that's why they say in the aesthetics of the world you have two types, Dionysic and Apollonic. Okay. Apollonic is Hollywood, Dionysic is noisy Kusturica.
Very good. You mentioned that the first two films were a little bit realistic, and I wanted to ask you, because one of the things that really strikes me is this duality between reality and fantasy, which is always in your work. And sometimes you start from stories that are real, that happen in real life, and then you infuse them with imagination and with fantasy, and that makes it very powerful. It ignites our awareness.
It's the life of nowadays. In some theories of nowadays life, you have some theoretical fundaments of what is sacral, which is regarding one drama player from Budapest, who is also a philosopher, Bela Hambash, who was saying that the mistake of Christian based dogma and theory is that the world is separated in between profane and sacral.
And you mix them.
But what I believe, what was in exchange for what we live today, it's a fiction which is absolutely overflowing the life of the people today. And the society of spectacle, which is another theory that comes from 60s, from the Marxists, who were in fact saying that all the outcome of the life of the people today is spectacle. And if you look at today how cinema is squeezed with the quantity and how the life is squeezed in between these theories that are in fact changed for what is in Underground. Underground is a movie in which I did not expect to be like coming before the reality shows, because this is a kind of reality show but the film that comes at the time when this dose of fiction was not so critical like today. In following this theory, the real life people start to despise. The real life has no value anymore. Everything is moving, in fact, in fantasy. That's why I think this film was made at a time when one century was ending and announcing the new one with all what we are living today. As much as you spend with your computer, less life you have. And We spoke today about this in the plane, my wife and myself.
Yeah.
And how much you, in fact, in a very classical theory, how much you alienate from yourself by not living the life, but wasting your life. The question now is also, why do I come to the festival? I made one festival because I believe that when you select good movies, you make this festivity alive. And you choose in between all this Netflix, I don't know how many of them, you have this quantity that is making equals in between cinema and informations. You cannot catch most of them. And with the industry that is pushing you towards noisy, topless, whatever, except that we still could grow the ambience for good cinema with festivals in which the cinema is the objective. Yeah. We go for good cinema, and we go to be happy and to go through the catharsis. Catharsis is the word that probably brings us back to this film.
Exactly. Could you speak a little bit more? Because I think that's very important, because we can, only in a dark room like this, together, can we have a collective catharsis. And I think your movies, they aim that. The
aim is always to have the climax of these exciting moments in which people that we speak about and with whom we go through this conflict in the movie, they go into this very Dionysic festivity that in the end is becoming tragic, but also has a context in which you could have a modernity sneaking and people could identify themselves with. You know, today cinema to me is uncontrolled, except that market defines what cinema needs to be. And you have two types of movies. One that is founded deeply into the introversy of an author, who later finds the way to translate it, but most of it is without size of what cinema used to be when I was a student, when we were trying, and I'm still trying to do the same, to put public and philosophical context and human intimacy together. Today, most of the films are made differently. They're either almost like a video games, or they are very introverted and not even trying to attack cinemas, except some of them. So we are losing the pace for one artistic expression, which I was always feeling with my personal need to get very cathartic moment, which then translates you into what art from Aristotle until the middle of 20th century was doing continuously. Today we have quite a different approach to this. And I'm still trying to do the same what I was doing. I don't know if it makes sense or not. For me, it does.
And I think it does to us too. But so I would like to open the conversation to anyone who would like to add.
Thank you very much. My name is Anita Lekic from Yugoslavia. Left Yugoslavia in 1980. And with me is Aleksandar Rankovic from Guimarães, who left in 1991. This movie and all of your work is really important to us, but this movie particularly, we both saw it, I think now the third or fourth time.
Because we are from Yugoslavia.
Yeah. And it shows the breakup of a country.
Could you speak to the microphone?
It shows the breakup of a country, which was very painful for millions of people who lost a country. So I would just like to pay my respects to you, not only with Dolly Bell, not only with Father Away on Business, not only with every single one, but this one in particular, because it is an ode to what was once a country. That's all.
Thank you very much. Once upon a time there was a country. This comes to what I was saying before. A breakup of a country was one of the generators of this movie. So if you want to do something bigger than you believed you are able to do, then you need the time to push you to do it. This was very painful, and this was something that happens once in your life. And this is the imagination that comes also from the energy of the group of people who were doing movies even from much earlier. And then it comes to the climax. I think this was even a climax of my career, because I cannot lose a country again like I did. I cannot be so forceful with another theme like I was with this one, except that I don't think everybody is affected in the ex-country like we are, because we believe that Yugoslavia was something worth fighting and worth believing in it. And most of them today, they don't want to say that they were Yugoslavs. So it's, I think, a special of the eastern part of the country more than the western one. And our country, by the way, was destroyed by military strategy, not because of we are wild, uncontrollable people. The question was how the United States of America could move 1,000 kilometers eastwards to be in Kosovo today, and that was the goal. Everything else around was just episode which created a mess and a catastrophic life for all of us.
I wanted to react to what you said about computers and the fact that it wastes your life, I mean, to be in front, but didn't you come to movies and to screens in a way, I mean, attracted by this putting aside of reality or this transformation of reality into something else, into something virtual, as a screen can help?
I was not speaking against this. I was just saying that in totality, the life of a people today is so much affected by virtual world that life goes on, passes by, and you are in fact spending time out of life. So life with the computer is not something that I could fight, because I also read some news. When I have to come to what is the basic of my craft, I must tell you that all the tricks, all the CGI tricks that we do today, they take much more time than they used to. So we cannot speak about progress by definition of this word that gives us better whatever we call it. Now I'm coming even to the problem how to define this. But what I want to emphasize is that life of walking on the mountains or experience the life on the street, growing with hooligans, distancing from hooligans, listening their stories, is something that I found a life when you're getting an adult. Today people get adult with less experience than I think they need to have. So virtual world is taking over, and I'm just warning. I'm not saying that I cannot, I would say I cannot prove, because I'm not a philosopher, but what I feel and what I could define as a status in which we live today, most of our life is transferred to virtual life. This movie speaks about this, but speaks about how people govern those who think and how they divert them the way they want people to go. So, internet, yes, if we are speaking about good revolutions that we could expect by the technology, how much people are going to be more aware of people who are in danger, people who are, I'm not speaking now about NGOs and how societies are created around the world. I'm speaking about what could you choose from what this virtual world gives you. Speed of exchange of information improves somehow, but we cannot look into the life within the world of virtuality that is given by definition of the time and the internet and all what computerized world gives you. I prefer to go to cinema much better than to look at movie on what I said, what is called Netflix or whatever, which gives you information. But if you look at together with somebody, you have still chance to get a wave of something that is strong inside the movie than when you are making phone call, smoking pot and watching the movie, and then in the middle you say, I don't want to watch this. When you come to this ritualistic art experience that you could compare with your life, then I think it's much better. But if you dive into the world of virtual possibilities, then it becomes dangerous. I watched the other day in China, they already have first hospital to get people, to get rid of dependence on computers. Which was funny, but it exists already.
Hey, you did this movie 20 years ago, more or less. My question is, do you think if you didn't, and you do like a movie about this same topic today, or if you have a chance for just remaking, I mean, everybody will be forgiven what you did before, and I do like a Wonderground 2.0 or something like that. Do you think it will be more different than you really did the movie like 20 years ago? Because, I mean, 20 years is still 20 years, but a person from 20 years until 40 years old, I think, changed a lot more than like from 40 to 60. So my question in general is, do you think the movie...
The question is if I want to be 40 now.
That's a good point also. Or the movie will be more pessimist, maybe.
You know what? Once in the time life of a film director, you get such a forceful move, and you are defined. As I said before, you are defined by something huge that happens. Today we don't have this kind of. The world is absolutely changed. This film is inspired by Bernardo Bertolucci. This film is this film grows as my wish to do something close to these people who used to do great movies. That's why I was saying before, we were in the end of the previous century trying to equalize, and before anything is what you ask, the breakup of the country. And my reaction to this breakup was constructed as you've seen. But this was a film whose aesthetics are defined by also second half of the 20th century, in which we were trying to do films which put together sense of watchable movie and at the same time author's film. I think American cinema in the 70s proved the best this intention. Why don't we have today films like Cabaret by Bob Fosse? We don't have it because ideology that is installed above all ideologies is not to have ideology. That's the ideology of today. They want to prove that you don't need to speak about existential things. You don't have to put together history because they believe history is behind us, but this is not true. This is a big lie. We don't have existential, political, and other problems being put together and making an attitude. We are living in a time when attitude is dissolved. And this film was also depending on the reaction of 90s when there was still idea in which political opinion is not just generated by George Soros ideas how you could make Arab Spring and to destroy half of the planet because he believes that somebody needs to be removed because he's a dictator. This film speaks about this, but speaks from the very inner need to react to what's going on next to you. And in this period, you never forget, this film was very much unwelcomed by a group of French caviar gauche left philosophers who were doing a scandal. And when I was speaking to ex-president of France, Mr. Chirac, that Alain Finkielkraut made an article on the front page of Le Monde against this movie, calling it Americanized version of Serbian propaganda. And when I spoke to him, I told him, but do you know, Mr. President, that this man never saw the movie and that this was a breach of morality? He said, no, I know, he's a very good man. And I was not trying to prove that he's good or bad, but this was still a period in which even such an awful article of a man who didn't see the movie, who comes on the front page and who speaks about something that is very painful. But I'm speaking about him not because he is part of this, but he's a part of the time that was coming afterwards. It doesn't matter. He didn't see the movie. Then when he went to see the movie, he appeared in the news and he said, you know what, I was right. Before I saw this, I wrote something and now it's just proof that I was completely right. Which is the proof of immorality that becomes, in most of the countries today, a way of life. You know, when they spoke after they destroyed the country that I spoke, the first one who came to bring democracy, when they asked him about, Mr. President, but this is not moral. And he answered, yes, but you cannot make asphalt roads with morality or build a house with morality. Breakup of the rules and destruction of the moral world that we recognized from the past is also part of this film. But this is not today. So if I was even trying to push to do whatever I know in order to make a movie like this, I would be very wrong. So, and again, time makes it through you, not you just in the time.
Hello, I would like to thank you. Your films filled my teenagehood, and whenever I can, I show them to other people. I would like to ask you, for you, what is more important? If it is resistance or emancipation? Not more important. I know that these are different things, but what do we need now, and how can we do it? How can we transmit? How can we emancipate? How can we resist to everything that is happening? I know this is a huge question, but
it's a good question, because what I was saying before, 20 years ago, you didn't have so many challenges and temptations. When we are speaking about the computerized world, I'm speaking about how much it takes you away from the smell of life that is also happening on the sea, on the river, on the street. So how to anticipate a life today when you are squeezed in between so many virtual temptations? This is a big question, which somehow I believe that history and whatever you found in the history is not linear, like in the mathematics. You cannot just look at for the consequences of something that you could predict. You have to go into more complicated predictions. You know, I do not operate within the system of Facebook and all this that you could do today. Not because I'm smart or not, but I'm just lazy to be so intensively inside. And when I speak about this, I mostly think is policing over people's minds, to offer you possibility to be close to the others, but at the same time to know what you think. But this is not just this. This could be in the very last moment for the power, like in this movie, in which the two people are just dosing informations and doing whatever they want to the rest of the world. I don't want to say that Facebook is the same, but it could come, it could strike back in the end, like all the adventures that humanity face. In this movie, in the end, the monkey puts the bomb and the bomb explodes and everybody runs away. And then it happens what I think today is very actual. They meet father and son. They run out and they meet movie makers. And this was my point in this movie, one of the strongest. When people lived under the selective information, which we believe we don't, but we are heavily dependent on very selective informations, because we are people. And when they get out of reality, they meet fiction, and they start killing people from the movie because they believe it's reality. And this is the point, philosophical point of our life. Are we going to, you know, I was grading my last movie, and now when you grade, when you put the different colors and you improve and you equalize the sequences, and scene happens in front of the tree, click, and there is no people in front of the tree. And then click, no tree. And then they put color on the very background. Then they bring, click, the tree. And then apparently actors who speak are in front. And you are very amazed. How come that from what used to be in philosophy the biggest invention, that somebody has created an image of the world? Today this image is multiplied, and you could do even, and people are very close to always to abuse the power, you could do whatever you do want. So how to emancipate ourselves? It's much better for the reggae music to find the answer than any philosopher. But how to anticipate is probably something where we operate much better. We could anticipate if we truly analyze and find the attitude and how to relate and how to react to this mixture of reality and fiction, which is very much attacking our mind. I don't know if I said something that I have anticipated.
Good evening. You've now mentioned current movies more than once, regretting that they lacked a Dionysian voice. So my question was, since we're at a movie festival that releases something like 20 new movies in Portugal this year, and there are other festivals every year in the world, Cannes, Berlin, Venice, etc., all of them filled with the releases by independent directors who very often do not have Hollywood levels of financing. Do you believe that in general all those independent directors also lack that Dionysian style of making movies and belong to the Apollonian category?
I think when you say Dionysian is when you put emphasis on the cathartic parallel elements, or you are focused on, this is Apollonic, on the narrative structure. Because when you want to be, if you want to be a film director that is mainstream, you have to be absolutely understanding that in the 90% of the cases, this narrative has to be for every stupid person in the world. So you need to be clear, and story needs to be designed so everybody could understand. If everybody has to understand, I always bring the issue of vegetables. If you want to create 1 ton of good tomatoes, you could still do it. But if you have to create billion of tomatoes, they are going to be tasteless. So the question in between Apollonic and Dionysic is also in how much recipient or how much the audience develops. And what is the future of cinema? Is the cinema going to stay in theaters as we believe? We don't know. In the festivals, somebody selects movies. Somebody shows 20 movies, among which we could always expect 3 to 4 they are what we call great. And independent cinema is having a less and less chances, I think, in the theatrical release, but as usual, it will be a festival, good place, festivity, which means Dionysic, catharsic, place where people together celebrate art and what art brings us.
Good evening. I think it's, for me, the way I read this film with my cultural references is about, this film is about war and how awful human beings become and strange in the middle of a war. I think it's interesting, the animals in the film. I would like to know what was your goal. For me. They seem to be the most rational beings in the film and peaceful. Another thing, of course, you had your references when you build this fiction world, because film is a fiction world. I see that human have no power at this time. They only criticize, but they have no power. Men have guns, bombs, and the women have no power at all. Was that so? And you think the world changed a little bit?
Did you say woman, mulher?
Woman, mulher, yeah? Okay.
Women.
Women, I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay. I think in the film they don't have any power at all.
But you know what? It's the same story like if you speak about cowboy movies and treatment of Indians over there. Until Indians started making movies about Indians, cowboys were in the second, I would say, the foreground was changed. So when the man is making the movie, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself, I tried always to be fair to women, but if underground was made by the woman, I don't know if in this world in which status is as it is, could be changed except for more understanding of the world of women, because it's not exactly the same when male or female are approaching space, time, and even historical events. So I would say that this film was not about women and men. It's about historical event that was painful and based on the two issues. When they asked Dostoevsky before he died, what will be the outcome, which way the world goes? He says perversity. And I found that to couple men and women, they are very much perverted by being able to put people in the cellar and send them wrong messages about reality. If you remember, for example, the references for this movie, if you remember Novecento by Bertolucci, you could find also the couple of the rich people who are in the end killed by the communists, by the people who want to change them. You could come to very similar idea that perverted personalities, men or women, are just having a dramatic role in the history. That's why I believe in this film this balance was created on the basis of the fundamental idea in which group of people, which is absolutely paradoxical, and that's probably film was also communicating well in the time when it was released, because it's the paradox that brings the new era, what used to be the problem of in between duty and the family, what used to be a problem in the different centuries. I think that end of 20th and beginning of this one is narrative is based on the paradoxality. And in this paradoxical world, we are operating not always with very poetic personalities, men and women.
Good night. I'm very happy to have seen this movie now that I'm 36, because when it came out, I was 15, and I wouldn't understand it. My personal life story is connected to ex-Yugoslavian countries. The only one I didn't visit was Bosnia. And my question, and when I travel, I like to learn about the history, but what I felt is that it was a complete mess. I couldn't understand because I was out, and I have friends in Croatia, Kosovo, and Macedonia. And when I tried to see or to understand why the war came about, I still don't.
I told you now.
But
the war in Yugoslavia was a country with 22 million people, different race, different nations. GDP was very good, producing weapons, having $4 billion more surplus in the military industry, selling weapons to Iraq, Iran, having very strong governmental aspects. In the end of this era, there was a Berlin Wall that was broken, and Yugoslavia was destroyed by outside elements, in which, as I said before, the main cause of our tragedy was historical construction of Drang nach Osten, which is a German word for moving towards the east. Military barrack from Munich moved to Kosovo. And this is the main dish. Everything else is just episode in which we express how much we are wild, how much we hate each other, which is, I think, something that could happen even in Denmark and Holland. If you look at Belgium today, you could find very easily even center of European community in which people hate each other and don't have a chance to show it. That's why not. In our countries, we had a chance to show how each is reacting to destruction of big country to create 7 small nationalistic states. Slovenia was first because Slovenia was by the even it's on they are on the sunny side of the Alps. They are still very much integrated into the Austrian-Hungarian Empire rules. And when you come to Macedonia and Kosovo, you are absolutely lost, because this kind of discipline and doesn't exist. But if you want to make a monkey to look like a man, it's very difficult. The same story with democracy. If you want to apply democracy to the place where people don't have habits or pre-story to become democratic, then you will have a mess, like you have around the world. You have Syria which is burning now, and everybody believes it's a question of dictatorship and something else. It's not true. It's absolutely imported. Imported from those who usually export the war around the world. And the world is run by this vicious triangle in between capital, profit, and war. And that's how the Wall Street and all these financial organizations function around the world.
For some directors, making movie, it's a very easy activity. For other directors, it seems to be an amazing amount of effort, a dramatic amount of effort. Could you tell us what is the role of this amount of effort you are doing? And for example, in this movie, Underground, it seemed that it was a mountain of efforts. What was the role of those efforts in the creation of the movie?
You know what, I made 9 films. By the way, this man is my friend, so he's asking something very friendly. I made 9 movies. What I was scared to death is to have people not getting what this young lady was mentioning here. Movie without excitement. 85% of my colleagues from my generation, they didn't care that much. That's why there was no excitement in the end. And I always remember screenings of directors' friends, when you get into the screening room and you are ready to say all the best words, because you have to be sometimes even more oriented towards directors' existential moments, because the most important existential moment of a film director is when the screening is finished and what people and how people react to this. And I remember few movies that I watched in which after the screenings everybody is silent, there is a table and there are pieces of some crackers or some of food, and nobody to say nothing except after 3-4 minutes one is saying, it was beautiful landscape in the middle of the movie. What was the scene? Yeah, where did you shoot? Where did you find such a beautiful place? So the whole discussion about the film ends up in the kind of diverting mind to unknown and to prove you that you missed the aim. In my case, it was not missing the aim. In my case, each movie that I was doing, I was ready to gamble to the end and to sacrifice all my potentials in order to avoid this question in the end of the screening, where did you find this beautiful place in the middle of the movie?
What is your favorite film? Your own. If you have to choose.
You know how these pathetic people say, I love them, they're all my babies. No. Every film that I did was difficult and heavily. The last one was almost, but you know, there are films which, no matter how much is important definition of time and how much you are the speaker of the time and speaker of the history through the destiny of people. I remember the Time of the Gypsies was the one that was very heavy, but the one that had the most powerful moments in which I myself couldn't resist regarding the power of the film. So I would say The Time of the Gypsies has the most essential existential power that I ever achieved. What I think, what was the movie that was showing my progress and which afterwards I think it's going to be re-evaluated like might be one of the best is Life is a Miracle, because of the substance of the Shakespearean drama that is rooted inside the story of different representatives of different ethnic and religious groups, which was certainly attacked bombed by all those who were saying he is portraying Muslims badly, all this. But this is stupid, because time will tell. So these are the two films in which I was mostly positively surprised. The others I expected. I was charming people like White Cat, Black Cat, and I was trying to make, you know, what is the best in this film career is 9 movies. None of them was patented to do success of this kind. So after Underground, I was deeply depressed, exhausted, and I wanted to make a documentary about music. That's how, for example, this film became a film. And there is a big lie each time that I promise to everybody. Now, definitely, I'm going to make a small, quick movie, and never happens.
Hi. It's a pleasure to be here. You've been one of my greatest inspirations, for sure. How have you seen yourself develop as a filmmaker over the years? Like, when you make a new film, you're always trying to do something different, but how would you describe it? What are you trying to do? How have you grown as a filmmaker? Like, if I made Underground in my life, I would be like the most happiest person, and probably I wouldn't know what to do next, probably.
But this is why I'm doing now, I'm organizing, I want to produce organic food, because I think it's time for this now. Enough organic movies. I was asking myself, I was lucky, that's why you have to count on the gambling side of cinema. I made the first film, and the film went to Venice and won Golden Lion for first and second movie. When I came with a man whose name is Vuk Babić, who is a Serbian film director, and I was very confused. I received Golden Lion, and then we were drinking in the hotel bar whiskeys, and I was asking him very honestly, sincerely, so okay, I don't need to do anything anymore in my life. He said, absolutely. This is what you need. And I said, but are you sure, Golden Lion, this is enough for one life? He said, I'm assuring you 100%. The next step to attack another movie, I believed I don't know nothing about cinema. So each time, starting even now when I'm 62, when I was 26, when I did this first film, I started always from the beginning. Once you come to prove your authority, that you are sure every scene will go smoothly, you know how to do it, catastrophe. Because cinema is a special type of religion in which gambling takes the biggest part. So in order to win, you really have to, each time, you have to be reborn, and you have to start from the very beginning. Once you start believing that you are big, that you know, forget it.
I have to tell you just a small episode. In the 80s, we were watching on Long Island. We were living with my husband, a Yugoslav, a Serb, but a Yugoslav. In the 80s, we were watching on Long Island on television. My husband, a Serb, but a Yugoslav, and me, and my daughter, who was then 6. We were watching Arizona Dream on television. And this 6-year-old daughter of mine, Lena, didn't bother us, didn't say, oh, Mom, switch the channel, oh, Mom, whatever, you know? She watched it through, and she said, I love the fish. And when you were coming now, I wrote to her in the US, I wrote an email or Skype or whatever, and I said, you know, that director where you said, I love the fish is coming. Yeah, I'll never forget the fish.
Good evening. In the last week, I watched 3 of your movies, being the Do You Remember Dolly Bell, Maradona, and Underground. And I want to ask you, what made you go from fiction to documentaries? I mean, you've talked about the presence of reality and fiction in your movies, and I want to know what made you go from fiction to documentary.
The best novels written in the world, they are documented by something that existed before. I just finished reading second time Don Quixote. And the Don Quixote is made on the basis of the book made by an Arab man who was doing chronically what was the event, one after the other, that happens in the life of Don Quixote. The best novels that we know, and I know, they are mostly created from, and the attitude towards the subject is always with the documents. Cinema, in the century that I started making movies, was always based on the documents. And then the question is how far you go from something that defines reality, and then how much you could change it. But in fact, to me, still good cinema is defined by good conflict and believable people who drive destinies which are ending into unknown, because and based on some rules that people could follow, not just to be surprised all the time. So documents are the basis of cinema, of scenarios, of whatever. So that's why and how I could just switch from one to another.
Hello. I would like to know if the use of animals in your movies are like the music a tool to help create the fantasy, or it's like a metaphor to your characters?
The use of animals is just to share the sense of emotion in this kind of designed circus that I always believe cinema was. And once you need to be helped to fulfill the expectations of people, like you say, you need to have your little zoo in which you could always take from one of your sleeves the argument which comes at the right moment.
I was going to ask you, which of your films was commercially the most, let's say, the most lucrative?
There was Black Cat, White Cat. This was very, in the sense of independent cinema, successful everywhere in the world.
Okay, okay.
And you see, this is what I say. When you are independent, you cannot count on the commercial success. It happens.
Yes, that's what I mean. You, let's say about 90% of all the films made, America or wherever, are really not much good. And all your films somehow, were they all, or did they finance themselves? I suppose your money pot must have run out, the one you had from the Frenchman. So how are your films financed? By sponsors or?
My films were always financed by, mostly helped by this man who was asking this question. And French, German, Italian money together, always. And I must tell you that these films were, except one, most of them expensive, but having a quite big audience, especially in France. Some even in Germany, some even in Italy.
Yeah, that means your films, up to a point, are commercially also successful.
I don't think instantly, but by the time, yes.
Okay.
Not all.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Welcome. I really don't want to bother you. One more?
Yeah. No, yes. One more, okay. Could you tell us about your favorite movies, please?
There are so many. There are so many, and there are most of them, they are history of cinema. And it's probably because I'm part of the past also, more than part of the future, of the future. So there are many good films. I must tell you that films that I grew up with were movies by Russian propaganda masters, Sergei Eisenstein. Then you have the best what you could have when you are speaking about big cinema is Andrei Tarkovsky. If you speak about rules of the game and Jean Renoir, there is an elegancy of expression. When you speak about the most incredible visual and also psychological fundament of what I was doing were movies by Fellini. The Jean Vigo's films, and there are many good films. You know, the biggest problem today is when you look back, and even today, how many good films already made. This is very scary. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.